The interview that has gained significant recognition between Tucker Carlson and Russian President Vladimir Putin was finally released this evening, and after watching the 2-hour interview, I believe it's important to make this video where I'm addressing what I believe are some of the most important takeaways. Now, I'm going to do it like this over a background video because my daughter is sleeping, and I just really wanted to get this information out as soon as I could. So grab your cup of tea and just relax, watch the beautiful trees, and let's get into this. Now, Tucker began this interview by asking Putin why he decided to go to war with Ukraine. And Putin went on to explain extensively his stance, along with the history of Russia and Ukraine. And honestly, after hearing it, you can easily see why it is a situation where his stance is one of logic and within his honorable right as the leader of Russia to take. He was promised by the United States that NATO would not try to expand their territory, and yet they did. 5 times. But here's where it gets juicy. When Tucker told him it sounded like the United States was being run by forces outside of American president's control, Putin completely agreed with him. These are no longer on the realm of conspiracy theory when you have world leaders discussing these things, but I digress. The United States supported a coup d'etat against Russia by neo-Nazis, and he goes on to explain this a lot further, so I'm going to dive into that for a sec here. He went on to explain that basically what he's doing in the Ukraine right now is a denazification. What is that? Well, as Putin describes it, he says that after gaining independence, Ukraine began to search for its identity and sought to build it upon false heroes who collaborated with Hitler, which was kind of a direct quote of what he had said, but for lack of a better terms, Nazi sympathizers, okay? Let's take a second to really let that sink in for a sec. Essentially, the Ukraine has turned neo-Nazis, the same people who oppressed and unalived the Polish, Russian, and Jewish populations, into national heroes, and complete with their own monuments and flag displays with their faces. And their names are being shouted by people who walk with torches, just as it was in Nazi Germany. This is going on in the Ukraine right now, according to Russian President Putin. Putin clearly stated that it was necessary to stop the dissemination of that ideology. If the people of Ukraine wish to be independent of Russia, he declared, quote, "that is completely fine," end quote. However, this independence based on Nazi ideology was not considered appropriate or acceptable. And I can understand that. He then went on to paint the accurate picture that as the current Ukrainian president visited the Canadian Parliament, the man who holds Nazi ideologies was given a standing ovation. So please take a moment to consider this as well. De-Nazification is the eradicating of Hitler's ideology. So peace talks have been in the works, almost finalized, but when Russia withdrew their troops, their agreements were thrown out. And a decree was signed that forbid any negotiations with Russia. So he point-blankly questioned, what purpose does the United States have with the Ukrainian conflict when we have our own border, immigration, and national debt conflicts to address? And I could not agree with him more. When Tucker asked who blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, Putin let out a little laugh and said, "You did, for sure," alluding to the CIA's involvement. Again, stop and ponder this for a moment. Another notable takeaway from this conversation was when Putin stated that a war on propaganda is close to impossible to defeat with the United States government because the US controls all of the media in the United States and many in Europe. Hence why Russian fear porn and Putin bad man. Where have we seen this before? And I particularly loved this part where he went on to explain that the world is split into two parts, much like the human brain, where one half is responsible for certain things like action and logic. The other half is responsible for creativity, and what he certainly was alluding to was that feminine dynamic, which is more concerned with creation and nurturing and so on. So he explained that the world should be functioning as this single wholeness of the brain, all encapsulated in order to function properly. And again, I could not agree with him more. Meaning, at least how I take this, he's saying that there is an importance of everyone, every country, with all of their unique abilities and ideas to be brought to the table for a successful world. And honestly, I hear a world leader speaking like this, it gives me a glimmer of hope. He then continued to say that the world is going through a period of severe disease, and again, I could not agree more. Putin also offered an interesting piece of information when he explained that the person that we know of as George W. Bush was a facade, stating that he was far more intelligent than he was believed to be by the general United States public. And I would even add much more diabolical once you do the research. Putin then continued on to say that he wants a negotiated settlement to what is happening in the Ukraine, and Ukraine will not accept. And again, does this not sound awfully familiar to what's happening over in that watermelon country? I'm just pointing out the facts here, guys. Just pointing out the facts. Now, for my intuitive takeaway from this entire interview, it gave me the impression of Putin being a mere He claims that he knew exactly what he was doing, as well as others. It gave me the impression of Putin being this meek father figure who's dealing with a temperamental child pitching a god-awful fit until they get their way. But he just sits back and allows them to pitch their fit, not willing to compromise, by the way, of what is right, but all while holding space for that spoiled child until they are ready to stop crying, catch their breath, regroup themselves, and finally have a mature discussion of compromise and peace and prosperity. It honestly felt like a very strong manifestation of a divine masculine in its highest alignment. And I won't say highest, but I will say much higher than what we've seen thus far in our societies. Now, before you pipe in, I'm well aware that propaganda could very much be applied on either side. At the end of the day, government is government, with motives and reasons to want to propagandize their citizens. But all in all, my opinion is he seemed very sincere and very matter-of-fact. When you get the chance, I highly suggest making it a point to listen to or watch this interview with Tucker Carlson and Vladimir Putin. It may just shift your perspective on some things. And did you watch it? I would love to hear your thoughts about it. Let me know in the comments. Much love to all of you.